My consultant in charge is Dr. Tina George. So this is the story of Mr. G, a 58-year-old gentleman who is a retired businessman who had presented to us with left ear discharge since the past 5 months, giddiness since 1 month, and transient loss of consciousness one day on the day of admission. He had left ear discharge, which was treated elsewhere, and he was told to have otitis externa treated elsewhere for the same, and discharge had decreased. His giddiness since the past 1 month was not getting up from bed or from a seated to standing position, not associated with change in direction of neck movements. Episodes would last ideally for a few minutes and then terminate. On the day of arrival, he had a transient loss of consciousness, which lasted for 2 to 3 minutes. It was associated with uprolling of eyes as observed by the relatives, but no abnormal lip movements or no postictal state. He had no bowel bladder incontinence. There was no history of any fever, chest pain, weakness of limbs during these past 5 months, 1 month, or at presentation. Historically. Past history wise, he is a known diabetic since the past 6 years, and about 6 months back, he was diagnosed with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction when was found to have a non-healing ulcer of the right foot. He had been on irregular medication at presentation. On examination, he was conscious and oriented. His vitals were significant in that he had a blood pressure of 200 by 80 while he was supine, but on standing, his blood pressure went down to 90 by 74. Pulse rate was 78 per minute and regular. He had no paleoictal cyanosis, clubbing, lymphadenopathy, or edema. At presentation, JVP was not elevated. He had no peripheral features of infective endocarditis. CNS examination wise, higher mental functions, he had a mini-mental status examination score of 24 over 30. He had a nasal twang to his voice. Power was 4 by 5 on the right side. He had absent ankle jerks. Otherwise, reflexes were present. Plantars were equivocal on the right and flexor on the left. He had a right hemianopia with non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy. Uh, Extraocular movements were normal and pupils were equal and reactive. He had a left partial ptosis. Gag was weak bilaterally. He had right-sided pass-pointing finger nose test, and he was not able to perform Romberg's in view of the severe giddiness on standing up. Otherwise, systemic examination was more or less okay. He had no carotid bruise. So we have a syndrome complex of a 58-year-old gentleman with left ear discharge, giddiness, and probable syncopal attack with severe postural hypotension with underlying diabetes mellitus and heart failure, having left second nerve involvement, ninth and 10th element cranial nerve palsies, bilateral and palsies bilaterally, and right-sided weakness on a background of left ear discharge. So initially we had thought of it as a stroke syndrome with a posterior circulation stroke, but on closer examination he had fullness on the fullness behind the ear on the left side, and presence of a bilateral absence of gag did not really fit into a picture of just a stroke syndrome. So then differentials widened. Other than posterior circulation stroke, we thought of a probable malignant otitis externa with a skull base involvement, acute meningoencephalitis with brain abscess or a space occupying lesion. Could the acute presentation be a toxic metabolic encephalopathy, secondary to diabetes? Now, regarding his orthostatic, his hypotension, we were thinking, could it be a carotid sinus syndrome? Could it be secondary to drugs? But he was irregular on them, and he was not taking any drugs like alpha blockers at presentation. Degenerative neurological diseases or a paraneoplastic syndrome. So we went ahead and did some investigations. Uh, Hemoglobin was 11.9. Total counts were 8,000. He had no left shift. Renal functions were otherwise normal. Electrolytes were fine. He had an HbA1c of 8.6%. There was close observation. There was mild left ear discharge, and a left ear swab culture sensitivity was sent, which grew Pseudomonas aeruginosa. And a mucosal biopsy from that site showed left external auditory canal, or from the left external auditory canal showed epithelial hyperplasia with inflammatory granulation tissue. Echo at this presentation to the hospital had shown normal LV systolic function, even though he had a heart failure outside. His CSF analysis was normal. MRI brain had shown acute infarcts in the left posterior watershed territory with small lacunar infarcts. Now, considering the possibility of a base of skull osteomyelitis secondary to a malignant otitis externa, and that the left ear swab culture sensitivity had grown Pseudomonas aeruginosa, we did an MRCT base of skull, which was suggestive of a left malignant otitis externa and automastoiditis with secondary skull base osteomyelitis. There was involvement of nasopharynx, infratemporal region, masticator space, parapharyngeal space, carotid space, skull base, bony erosions, and extension to temporomandibular joint, and extension into the left transverse and sigmoid sinus. So, because of this, he underwent expanded endoscopic nasopharyngeal debridement plus biopsy and left cortical mastodectomy and left mandibular condylectomy under GA. The biopsy had shown chronic osteomyelitis with yeast forms and also acute invasive fungal osteomyelitis with septate fungal hyphae and spores. So, possibility of two different fungal organisms here. So the diagnosis now was a malignant otitis externa with skull-based osteomyelitis with probable candidal infection of pterygoid and mandibular condyle and invasive aspergillosis of left ear and mastoid with severe orthostatic hypotension secondary to diabetic autonomic neuropathy, type 2 diabetes mellitus, and a heart failure. So I'll be talking a bit about diabetic autonomic neuropathy and like how you would approach it and what are the bedside autonomic function tests that we can do in our setting. So diabetic autonomic neuropathy may be detected in a majority of patients with diabetes, but is usually classified as a subclinical or clinical depending on the presence or absence of symptoms. This may be associated with poor glucose control and an increase in vascular risk factors. And if we have, if the patient has microvascular and macrovascular risk factors, the possibility of diabetic autonomic neuropathy rises. Cardiovascular autonomic neuropathy is a subset of diabetic autonomic neuropathy, wherein you have these presentations with tachycardia, exercise intolerance, orthostatic hypotension, postural tachycardia, adverse cardiovascular events, and silent ischemia, adverse renal and cerebrovascular outcomes. So, talking about tachycardia, exercise intolerance, and silent ischemia. Now, there is this study published in Diabetes Care that in the presence of diabetes with cardiac autonomic neuropathy, the risk of silent myocardial ischemia is significantly elevated. These patients tend to have resting tachycardia because of unopposed sympathetic activity. The parasympathetic fibers tend to get affected first, followed by the sympathetic fibers. So once the parasympathetic activity is diminished, there is unopposed sympathetic activity, and even while resting or while lying down, they may have a tachycardia. They have exercise intolerance, and they have, in cases of severe autonomic neuropathy, they have cardiac denervation with a fixed heart rate. And these patients can tend to have painless myocardial infarction, silent ischemia. So orthostatic hypotension is defined as fall in blood pressure of greater than or equal to 20 by 10 systolic bar diastolic within 3 minutes of moving from a supine to standing position. So there, because of impairment of vasoconstriction in splanchnic and peripheral vascular beds, syncope is a characteristic feature here. With diabetic autonomic neuropathy, there is loss of the diurnal variation in blood pressure. Supine hypertension occurs, especially in the night. Postprandial hypotension may also occur in these patients, which was seen in our case. These patients may have postural tachycardia. They have a high resting heart rate due to vagal cardiac neuropathy, and they have unopposed sympathetic activity. They can have adverse renal and cerebrovascular outcomes, like in our patient who had a posterior watershed infarct. So, just looking at the bedside autonomic function test, this is also present in our intranet in our neurology site. So these are the tests that we can do at bedside. Active standing is one. Second one is deep breathing. Valsalva maneuver may require a sphygmomanometer, which is maintained at a pressure greater than 40 millimeter mercury. So the basis of these tests is to assess bedside and confirm the presence of autonomic neuropathy. Active standing, like in our patient, had a significant drop in blood pressure, which was signifying unopposed sympathetic activity. Deep breathing is another thing that we can do. Slow breathing at 6 breaths per minute. Less than 10 beat per minute variation in heart rate is abnormal. And in ECG, if the longest by the shortest RR interval less than 1.2 suggests loss of variability. Valsalva maneuver, there are 4 phases, and as mentioned here, the phases here are the normal responses. But if this does not happen, then there is a significant autonomic neuropathy. These are some other tests that are also can be done at bedside, but they are not as reliable as the first 3 tests that I mentioned. So these are other standardized autonomic tests which may not be done possible at bedside, but these are the actual standardized tests that are scientifically proven or have greater reliability. So our patient eventually had a post-surgical drop in blood pressure. He was initiated on meropenem, voriconazole, and anidula fungin. He required inotropic supports. He had a silent ischemia, a type 2 myocardial infarction, a renal failure, and eventually succumbed to his illness. But the learning points here is that cardiovascular autonomic neuropathy is a part of a diabetic autonomic neuropathy, which can be associated with significant morbidity and mortality. The history and examination itself can clinch to the diagnosis. It is associated with microvascular and macrovascular complications of diabetes, and bedside autonomic function tests can help in confirming the diagnosis. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanuj. Any comments from Tina, Dr. Tina?
I think this was a tough case because initially the order of events was that he presented with a what looked like a CVA to us with predominantly a left hemianopia, and he had a watershed infarct with this severe postural hypotension. And subsequently, it was actually around 48 hours later that he gave us a history of the ear discharge. And by then, he had started developing swelling of the left side of the face and the drooping of the eyelid, and the fact that his palatal weakness on the left side couldn't be explained by the imaging findings is what prompted us then to look for an alternative cause. It's also this patient had such extensive involvement of the base of skull that the fungal infection was so severe that it had actually cased around the carotid on the left side. So initially we attributed the entire postural hypotension just to his diabetic autonomic neuropathy, but there have been case reports where severe base of skull infections can cause carotid hypersensitivity and severe autonomic dysfunction. So I think um, it was a learning case for all of us because of the severe autonomic dysfunction we had not seen before.
Yes, yes. So this is diabetic autonomic neuropathy. When it is mild and asymptomatic, a lot of people may have it, but if it is significant, it is associated with significant, like Sanuj said, morbidity and mortality, and very rightly, skull base and carotid sheath involvement. Quite likely, the very fact that he had the jugular vein involvement and sigmoid sinus going upwards, so there was infections tracking through the carotid sheath as well. This is a really difficult case to deal with, and the very fact that he had so much neuropathy implies that he had, he was in a fairly immunocompromised state. Any comments from anybody else on this patient? We'll move to the next case then. Dr. Ria